Hello everyone, I'm going to be streaming a brand new video game, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, which is hardly brand new anymore because my goodness, I was finally able to get this in the mail. Thank you for nothing, Amazon Prime, so-called 2-day shipping. Just for some context, the game released like 8 days ago. But this stream will be full of complaining enough, so I'm going to be as positive as I can. Because first of all, I thought we would talk a little bit about the Pokemon games in general and the generations before we get going here. So I would like to first of all share this, which I compiled because I had recently come across an article where the person was obviously trying to bend the statistical data in their favor, and their claim was that Generation 4 was the best generation of Pokemon ever. Which my immediate reaction is, okay, by all means, state your source, because in my humble opinion it's actually the worst generation of Pokemon games ever made. So I went about looking at the actual statistical analysis where I grouped all of the generational games together, and these are each generation with the abbreviations in millions of sales. So if you look at the very last one, the Sword Shield games, those are still actively selling. So we'll kind of ignore that. Notice though that the least amount of sales are the X and Y games, and the second to least amount is Gen 4, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Now, usually when it comes to actual physical sales and actual quality of the media that is being sold, there's a commensurate sort of, that is to say, a proportionate or in equal amount, size, or degree. So, indeed, Generation 3 has sold more games than Gen 4. In fact, if you want to actually compare apples to apples, notice in Gen 6, where we had X and Y, the 3DS was a very poor selling piece of hardware, and it wasn't until much later when Nintendo decided to release the Nintendo 2DS platform that the console was a bigger seller amongst kids or parents who were buying the device for their kids. Which is actually interesting because in Generation 3, which had Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, those were the best selling games for the Game Boy Advance. Question: was Pokemon Diamond and Pearl the best-selling games of the DS hardware? No. In fact, if you actually look at the DS, which has sold about 154 million units, to the Game Boy Advance, which has sold 81 million units, that's a 1.9 multiplier. If you compare, that would be like comparing 44.1 million copies of Gen 3 games to a meager 21.4 million copies of Gen 4 games. But we could probably talk for hours, and I probably would have for more about that. But let's not dwell on that too much, because if I'm going to be answering the question, why don't I like Generation 4 Pokemon games? Well, let's get through this as fast as we can, shall we? In Gen 4, the original Pokemon Diamond and Pearl games, the number one biggest flaw was the extremely slow speed. Everything about those games were slow. Everything loaded slow, the battles were slow, the animations were slow, the scrolling was slow, the text was slow, the HM usage animations were slow, the surfing was hideously slow, and even saving the game was ridiculously slow. I swear it would take 12 seconds for you to hit the save, and then it would like save for 12 seconds. I'm not even joking. By the time I got to X and Y and it saved instantly, just like Gen 1 games did, I realized that Pokemon was finally going in the positive direction. Now, the second biggest flaw was the annoyingly high battle rate. Now, I would say almost all Pokemon games probably have a random battle encounter rate that is too high. However, this was especially trying when you were surfing, which again was very slow. If you were trying to explore passageways or branching paths whilst surfing, you would only go 2 miles an hour, and then there'd be another random battle because you walked 5 steps, and then once you resumed back to the overworld, you had to remember, okay, which way? Where was I? Was I coming back from this fork? Was there left? Was there right? Absolutely ridiculous. A third major flaw was the HM usage problem. It would seem that it was very difficult to find any specific Pokemon that could learn a lot of HMs. And so even in the Victory Road, not that I don't like puzzles or labyrinthine things or dungeon crawling aspects, it's very frustrating to have 3 or even 4 Pokemon slaves as you explore Victory Road, because oh, you need Surf, oh, you need Rock Smash, oh, you need Rock Climb, oh, we need Waterfall, oh, we need Strength. So that was another frustrating aspect of the game. Another one, I guess, what are we up to? 4. Another flaw was no DS features. Now, what in the world was that all about? The Nintendo DS was this brand new piece of hardware. It had touchscreen capability, it had a microphone, and yet what did Diamond and Pearl do with that? The amount of touchscreen ability was using buttons on the screen. So yes, you would have to press the button on the touchscreen that said fight or Pokemon or item or run. Now, dear Game Freak, do you realize that pushing on the screen of a touchscreen is logically equivalent to pushing a button when the cursor is selecting that? So a very unoriginal, uninspiring way of using this brand new technology for this main flagship Pokemon game. The Pokemon Chatbot was invented for the sole purpose of screaming into your microphone. I don't know about you, but I was unable to play this game or be anywhere and have the ability to just randomly scream in a microphone if I am going to be using a Chatbot battle cry. What are we up to? Number 5? There were basically no improvements from Gen 3. At least in Gen 5, even though it was still sprite-based, there were multiple sprites so it would appear as if it were animated. And I think also one final thing to complain, it was the fewest number of new Pokemon added. Now, typically you had to even play through the entire video game at all to be able to even get a huge chunk of the new Pokemon, which were extended evolutions of already existing Pokemons, furthering the evolution change. And in some respects you had to play through an entire game to get one evolutionary item like the Magmarizer so that you can get one Magmortar. And that was just a few things that I was able to reproduce from memory. I'm sure if I actually went back and played the original Gen 4 games, I would be able to find even more hideous flaws with them. And let's maybe compare apples to apples, right? Because we don't want to look at things in the lens of 2021. The original games were horrible. Let's look at the contemporary games, such as Etrian Odyssey. Now, this was a game where the battles and everything were fast. You could be cruising in the dungeon and then initiate a random battle, and then within seconds you would be inputting commands. Whereas in old Pokemon Diamond, we gotta wait 12 seconds before all of the stupid things are loaded and the stupid animations, which you can't turn off even if you have everything set to nothing as far as animations go, before you can even start to input whether to fight, Pokemon, item, run. Another good contemporary comparison is Dragon Quest Monsters Joker. That was released in the same vicinity of time, and yet they had fully 3D models, which took, what, till 2013? Pokemon X and Y for Game Freak to jump on that bandwagon. And I would say even in the topic of Pokemon itself, Pokemon Ranger is a much better use of the DS hardware to be able to draw circles or symbols or draw anything on the touch screen. Lamentably, that franchise died, but those games were way funner than the Gen 4 Diamond, Pearl, and Platinums were. Alright, so I don't want to come across as like a super negative person, because in Gen 4 there were some positives when it came to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, such as well, anyways, let's go ahead and get this party started.